Imagine calling the police on a black teenager just for sitting on a park bench, only to freeze in terror when his mother arrives. This is the moment Karen Whitmore's life shattered. A viral video, a national outrage, and a powerful attorney who made sure justice was served. But this story isn't just about revenge. It's about redemption. From which country are you enjoying this story? Please make sure to tell us in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, because what happens next will leave you speechless.
The afternoon sun hung lazily over Riverside Park, casting long shadows across the freshly cut grass. Jaden Carter adjusted the straps of his backpack, his basketball tucked under one arm as he strolled down the winding path. His headphones pulsed with the bass line of his favorite song, the rhythm syncing perfectly with his easy stride. Life, for once, felt simple. He'd just aced his chemistry final. His coach had praised his jump shot at practice, and his mom had promised her famous mac and cheese for dinner. The world in that moment was good. A few yards away, Karen Whitmore perched on her usual bench, the one she claimed every Saturday like it had her name engraved on it. She sipped her overpriced iced latte, scrolling through her phone with one hand while the other clutched her designer purse like a lifeline. Her eyes flicked up occasionally, scanning the park with the vigilance of a woman who considered public spaces her personal kingdom. Jaden, oblivious to her presence, dropped onto the far end of the bench, exhaling as he stretched his legs. He pulled out his phone, shooting off a quick text to his mom. "Be home by 6. Karen's fingers froze mid-scroll. Her head swiveled toward him, her lips pressing into a thin line. A teenager, a black teenager, sitting on her bench, without permission, without even acknowledging her existence. The audacity! Her grip tightened around her phone. She watched him for a full minute, waiting for him to do something, anything, that would justify the unease coiling in her stomach. But he just sat there, nodding along to his music, occasionally chuckling at something on his screen. That was worse, somehow. The fact that he was so comfortable. She stood abruptly, her heels clicking against the pavement as she marched a few feet away. Her thumb hovered over her phone screen before she dialed the number she'd memorized from too many true crime podcasts. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the line. 911, what's your emergency? Karen lowered her voice, casting another glance at Jaden. Yes, I'm at Riverside Park, and there's a suspicious person here. A young man. He's been loitering, acting strangely. I think he might be, I don't know, dealing drugs or something. A pause. Has he threatened you, ma'am? Well, no, but has he approached anyone? Not yet, but he looks like he's waiting for someone. It's very unsettling. Another pause. Longer this time. Karen could practically hear the dispatcher's patience thinning. We'll send a unit to check it out. She hung up, satisfaction curling in her chest. There. That would teach him to sit where he didn't belong. Jaden remained oblivious, humming under his breath as he scrolled through his playlist. 10 minutes later, the squad car rolled up, lights off but still unmistakable. 2 officers stepped out, their expressions caught between boredom and resignation. Officer Reynolds, a grizzled veteran with salt and pepper stubble, took one look at Jaden and sighed. Karen swooped in before they could even approach him. That's him, she hissed, pointing dramatically. He's been sitting there for almost 20 minutes, just watching people. It's creepy. Jaden finally noticed the commotion. He tugged his headphones down, blinking at the officers. Can I help you? Officer Reynolds held up a hand. Just a routine check, son. Someone called in a concern. Jaden's brows knit together. A concern about what? Karen scoffed. Don't play innocent. You've been lurking around here like you're up to something. Jaden stared at her. Ma'am, I was listening to music and texting my mom. Officer Reynolds shot Karen a look that very clearly said, Asterisk, really? This is what you called us for? Asterisk. But before he could say anything, a new voice cut through the tension like a blade. Well, this looks fascinating. Every head turned. Walking toward them with the effortless authority of someone who owned every room she entered was Veronica Carter. Her heels clicked against the pavement, her tailored blazer sharp enough to draw blood. She didn't rush, didn't raise her voice. But the moment her eyes locked onto Karen, the temperature in the park dropped 10 degrees. Jaden straightened. "Mom!" Karen's mouth went dry. Veronica didn't even glance at the officers. She kept her gaze fixed on Karen, her smile slow and dangerous. "So, you're the one who called the police on my son for... what, exactly? Existing while black." Karen's throat worked soundlessly. Veronica tilted her head. "No." "Then maybe it was for sitting on a public bench? Or was it for daring to breathe in your general vicinity?" Officer Reynolds cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we were just leaving," Veronica finished for him. "Because unless my son broke an actual law, this conversation is over." The officers exchanged a look. Then, with a muttered apology to Jaden, they retreated to their car. Karen, meanwhile, looked like she'd been slapped. I was just concerned," Veronica supplied. "How noble of you." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a murmur only Karen could hear. "But here's the thing about playing stupid games, Karen. You win stupid prizes." A beat of silence. Then, from somewhere in the gathering crowd, a phone camera clicked. Karen's face drained of color. And Jaden? He just grinned. The silence that followed Veronica's words was so thick it could have been cut with a knife. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Her carefully constructed sense of superiority crumbling under the weight of the stares directed her way. The park, which had been buzzing with the usual weekend chatter just moments ago, had gone eerily quiet. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing, as if nature itself was holding its breath to see what would happen next. Jaden shifted his weight from one foot to the other, the basketball still tucked under his arm. He glanced at his mom, then back at Karen, and for the first time since this whole mess started, he allowed himself to really look at her. She wasn't what he'd expected. Up close, she wasn't some cartoon villain twirling a mustache. She was just a woman. A middle-aged woman with perfectly highlighted hair and a designer bag that probably cost more than his sneakers. The kind of woman who'd never been told no in her life. And right now, she was terrified. Veronica didn't move. She didn't have to. Her presence alone was enough to make Karen take an involuntary step back, her heels catching on the uneven pavement. For a second, Jaden almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then the murmurs started. Did she really call the cops on a kid for sitting? I saw the whole thing. He wasn't doing anything. That's Veronica Carter. She took down the PD last year in that profiling case. The words slithered through the crowd, wrapping around Karen like a noose. Her carefully manicured nails dug into the leather of her purse. She could feel the weight of every eye on her. The judgment, the disdain. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She was the one who called the police. She was the one who was supposed to be in control. But Veronica Carter didn't play by those rules. "Mom," Jaden said quietly, "can we just go?" Veronica's gaze flicked to her son, and for the first time since she'd arrived, her expression softened. "Yeah, baby, we can go." She turned back to Karen, her voice dropping low enough that only the three of them could hear. "Consider this your one and only warning. The next time you decide to weaponize your prejudice, remember this moment. Because I promise you, I won't be this nice next time." Karen's throat worked, but no sound came out. Veronica didn't wait for a response. She looped her arm through Jaden's and steered him away, her heels clicking against the pavement with the same steady rhythm as before. The crowd parted for them, some people nodding in silent approval, others whispering behind their hands. Jaden waited until they were out of earshot before letting out a long breath. That was insane. Veronica squeezed his arm. "You okay?" "Yeah, just tired." She nodded, understanding without him having to explain. It was the same tiredness that came from having to constantly prove you belonged in spaces that should have been yours by default. The kind of exhaustion that settled deep in your bones. Behind them, the park erupted into noise again, the spell broken. Someone laughed too loud. A dog barked. Life went on. But for Karen Whitmore, standing alone on the path with her latte forgotten at her feet, nothing would ever be the same. The ride home was quiet. Jaden stared out the window, watching the city blur past as Veronica navigated the streets with the same effortless precision she did everything else. The tension in the car was palpable, but it wasn't the bad kind. It was the kind that came from knowing words weren't necessary, that just being together was enough. Veronica broke the silence first. "You hungry?" Jayden shrugged. "Kinda lost my appetite." She glanced at him, her fingers tightening around the steering wheel. "We're stopping for ice cream." He couldn't help but smile. That was his mom. No matter how bad things got, ice cream was always the answer. 20 minutes later, they were seated at a small table in the back of a diner. 2 massive sundaes between them. Jayden poked at his with his spoon, the whipped cream slowly melting into the chocolate. "You know," Veronica said around a mouthful of mint chip, "this isn't the first time some entitled white woman has called the cops on me." Jayden looked up, surprised. "Seriously?" "Mem. Sophomore year of college. I was studying in the library, minding my own business, when this girl, blonde, rich, the whole package, decided I looked suspicious. She rolled her eyes. Security showed up, asked for my ID, the whole 9 yards." "What did you do?" "Laughed in their faces." Veronica smirked. "Then I showed them my student ID and asked if they needed anything else. The look on that girl's face? Priceless." Jayden snorted. "Sounds about right." They lapsed back into silence, the only sound the clinking of spoons against glass. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Jayden sighed. "Do you think she'll do it again?" Veronica didn't pretend not to know who he was talking about. "Maybe. Probably. People like her don't change overnight." "Then what's the point?" "The point," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand, "is that she'll think twice next time. And the time after that. And eventually, maybe she'll realize the world doesn't revolve around her." Jayden nodded, turning his hand over to lace their fingers together. For the first time since the park, he felt the knot in his chest loosen. His mom was right. As usual. Karen's hand shook as she fumbled with her keys, dropping them twice before finally managing to unlock her front door. The house was dark, the only light coming from the street lamp outside. She kicked off her heels, wincing as her feet hit the cold hardwood. She needed a drink. The wine bottle clinked against the glass as she poured, her movements jerky, uncoordinated. She took a long swallow, the alcohol burning its way down her throat. It didn't help. Her phone buzzed in her purse. She ignored it. It buzzed again, and again. With a growl, she yanked it out, her stomach dropping when she saw the notifications. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all blowing up, all with the same video. Her face, pale and drawn, staring at Veronica Carter like a deer in headlights. The caption read, "Karen calls cops on black teen for sitting. Gets humiliated by his lawyer mom. Karen versus karma. The glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. She was ruined. The ice cream had long since melted into a soupy mess by the time Jayden finally pushed the glass away. The diner was nearly empty now, just the two of them and a tired-looking waitress wiping down the counter. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across Veronica's face as she scrolled through her phone, her expression unreadable. Jayden watched her for a moment before speaking. "They posted it already?" Veronica didn't look up. 3 different angles. One with over 500,000 views already." A heavy silence settled between them. Jayden picked at the edge of the table, the vinyl peeling slightly under his fingernail. He should have been relieved. This was justice, wasn't it? Karen getting exactly what she deserved. But instead, all he felt was hollow. Across from him, Veronica finally set her phone down with a sigh. "You're quiet." Jayden shrugged. "Just thinking about how fast everything blew up." He met her eyes. "One minute I'm just sitting there, the next I'm a meme." Veronica's mouth tightened. "It's not right. None of this is right." The waitress chose that moment to drop off the check, her eyes flicking between them with poorly concealed curiosity. Veronica handed her a card without a word, waiting until she was out of earshot before continuing. "I could sue her, you know." Jayden blinked. "What?" "Defamation. False police report. Emotional distress." Veronica ticked them off on her fingers, her voice low and steady. "We'd win too." The thought should have been satisfying. But all Jayden could picture was Karen's face when she realized who his mom was. The way her confidence had shattered like glass. Would it change anything? He asked quietly. Veronica stilled. Would it stop the next Karen from doing the same thing to some other kid tomorrow? Jayden pressed. For the first time that night, Veronica looked uncertain. Karen's phone wouldn't stop ringing. She'd thrown it across the room after the 20th call from an unknown number, but that didn't stop the texts from pouring in. Hope you're proud of yourself. Racist bitch. Your husband must be so embarrassed. That last one stung more than the others. Mark. She hadn't even checked if he was home when she'd stumbled in earlier. Now, creeping down the hallway, she could see the light under his office door. The muted sound of a news anchor's voice filtered through the wood. Viral video showing a white woman calling police on a black teenager in Riverside Park has sparked outrage online. Karen's stomach twisted. She raised a hand to knock. The teen has been identified as Jayden Carter, son of prominent civil rights attorney Veronica Carter, who famously... Her hand dropped. Mark's voice, cold and unfamiliar. Jesus Christ. Karen backed away silently. The wine bottle in the kitchen was still half full. She drank directly from it this time. The TV in the Carter living room was tuned to the same news segment, though the mood couldn't have been more different. Jayden flopped onto the couch next to his mom, tossing her the remote. You're famous. Again. Veronica muted the reporter mid-sentence. Not the kind of fame I wanted for you. Yeah, well. Jayden picked at a loose thread on the cushion. At least everyone's on our side this time. A beat passed. You're really not going to sue? Veronica studied her son. Really studied him. The way his shoulders hunched slightly, like he was trying to make himself smaller. The shadow in his eyes that hadn't been there this morning. No, she said finally. But I'm going to make sure she never does this to anyone else. Jayden frowned. How? A slow smile spread across Veronica's face. The kind that made corporate lawyers break out in cold sweats. By giving her exactly what she wants. The pounding on the door woke Karen from a wine-fueled stupor. She blinked blearily at the clock. 3:17 a.m. The pounding came again, louder this time. Police! Open up! Her blood ran cold. Fumbling with the lock, she yanked the door open to find two officers standing on her porch. Different ones than at the park. Behind them, a news van idled at the curb, its spotlight trained directly on her. Karen Whitmore? The female officer asked. Karen nodded, suddenly aware of her disheveled appearance, the wine stain on her blouse. You're being served. The officer thrust an envelope into her hands. What is this? Karen's voice came out shrill. Restraining order. The officer's tone was icy. You are to have no contact with Jayden Carter or his family. Violation is punishable by up to a year in jail. The news camera zoomed in as Karen tore open the envelope, her eyes scanning the legalese until they landed on the signature at the bottom. Veronica Carter, ESQ. The camera lights burned like hellfire. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The officer tipped her hat. Have a nice night, ma'am. Karen stood frozen in the doorway as the news crew packed up, as the police car pulled away, as the neighborhood lights flicked on one by one. Inside, her phone buzzed endlessly. She didn't move. The morning sun filtered through the blinds as Jayden shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from his eyes. His mom was already at the table, two steaming mugs in front of her. You were right, she said without preamble. Jayden blinked. About what? Veronica slid a newspaper across the table. The headline blared, Woman who called cops on teen hit with restraining order. Below it, a still from the viral video. Karen's face, frozen in shock. Jayden swallowed. I didn't mean. I know. Veronica sighed. But sometimes the system only works when you use its own rules against it. Jayden picked up the paper, studying it. What happens now? Now. Veronica took a sip of her coffee. Now we let the internet do the rest. As if on cue, Jayden's phone buzzed. A text from his friend Malik. *dude. Check Twitter. Hashtag Karen vs. Karma is trending worldwide. Jayden opened the app. The first tweet had over 200K likes. Shout out to Veronica Carter for teaching us all how to handle racists with receipts and the law. Icon behavior. Asterisk. He showed his mom. Veronica smirked. Told you ice cream fixes everything. Outside, the world kept turning. Somewhere across town, Karen Whitmore deleted all her social media accounts. And in a small kitchen bathed in morning light, mother and son clinked their coffee mugs together. The coffee had gone cold in Karen's hands. She sat at her kitchen island, staring at the restraining order papers spread out before her like some kind of poisonous artifact. The legal jargon blurred together, but one phrase kept jumping out at her. Asterisk, respondent shall maintain no less than 500 feet distance from petitioner at all times. Asterisk. A hysterical laugh bubbled up in her throat, as if she'd ever go near that woman or her son again. Her phone vibrated against the marble countertop. Another unknown number. She swiped it away without looking, her fingers leaving smudges on the screen. How had they gotten her number? How did they always find you? The house was too quiet. Mark had left for work without saying goodbye, without saying anything at all. The silence between them had grown teeth overnight. Karen reached for the television remote, needing to drown out the thoughts screaming in her head. The local news channel flickered to life just in time for her to see her own face, pale and drawn from last night's confrontation, splashed across the screen. Continues to spark national debate about racial profiling in public spaces. The anchor was saying. Legal experts weigh in on whether the restraining order against Karen Whitmore sets a new precedent. She muted it so fast her nails scratched the plastic. The doorbell rang. Karen froze. Reporters? Police? Some angry mob here too. Another ring. Longer this time. She crept to the front window, peeling back the curtain just enough to see. A delivery man stood on her porch holding an enormous bouquet of flowers. Her breath came out in a whoosh. Just flowers. Probably from Mark, his way of apologizing for last night. She opened the door. Karen Whitmore? The delivery man asked. Yes. Sign here, please. The bouquet was heavier than it looked. Karen carried it to the kitchen, already searching for the card among the lilies and roses. Her fingers closed around a small envelope. To Karen, it read in elegant script. Asterisk thought you could use these today. V asterisk. The vase slipped through her fingers and shattered on the tile. Jaden's sneakers squeaked against the gym floor as he pivoted, faking left before driving right for a layup. The ball kissed the backboard and dropped through the net with a satisfying swish. Nice move, Malik said, tossing it back to him. You gonna try that in the game Friday? Maybe. Jaden dribbled between his legs, the rhythmic thump of the ball steadying him. If coach puts me in. Malik snorted. After yesterday? You're starting, no question. Jaden's hands faltered. The ball rolled away. The whole team had seen the video by now. Some had clapped him on the back, called him a hero. Others just looked at him differently, like he was made of glass. You good? Malik asked. Yeah, just tired. The lie tasted bitter. He'd barely slept, jumping every time his phone buzzed with another notification. His Instagram followers had tripled overnight. Strangers kept tagging him in posts with hashtag Black Lives Matter and hashtag Stay Strong. It should have felt good. It just felt heavy. Coach's whistle cut through the gym. Carter, my office. Malik raised his eyebrows. Jaden wiped his face with his jersey and followed. Coach's office smelled like old sweat and protein powder. The man himself sat behind his cluttered desk, a tablet open in front of him. Close the door, he said without looking up.
Coach finally met his eyes. You holding up okay? The unexpected kindness made Jaden's throat tight. Yeah, Coach. Good. Coach slid the tablet across the desk. Because the school board wants to make you the face of their new diversity initiative. Jaden stared at the mock-up on the screen, his basketball photo superimposed over a rainbow background with the words, "Riverside High stands against racism," in bold letters. His stomach dropped. They want an announcement at Friday's game, Coach continued. Whole team wearing special warm-up shirts, local news will be there. The walls felt like they were closing in. Jaden's fingers dug into his thighs. It's your choice, Coach said, softer now. But think about the message it sends. Jaden looked at the tablet again. at his own face already being used as a symbol before he'd even agreed. He thought about Karen Whitmore's flowers. "Can I think about it?" he asked. Coach nodded. "Games in 48 hours. Veronica adjusted her earpiece as the producer counted down in her ear. 5 seconds, Ms. Carter." The studio lights were brighter than she remembered. She smoothed her blazer and faced camera 3, the one with the red light now glowing. "And live in 3, 2... Good morning, America," the anchor said, his too-white smile gleaming. "We're joined now by civil rights attorney Veronica Carter, who made headlines this week after a video showed her confronting a woman who called police on her son. Veronica, welcome. Thank you for having me." The anchor leaned forward. "First, how is Jaden doing?" Veronica kept her expression neutral. "He's resilient, like all black children in America have to be." A beat of silence. The anchor cleared his throat. "This restraining order you filed, some are calling it excessive. What would you say to those critics?" She smiled then, the sharp one her opponents knew meant danger. "I'd say read the statistics. Every 28 hours, a black person is killed by police in this country. My son was lucky. Next time, the Karen might be holding a gun instead of a phone." The anchor blinked. "Well, he glanced at his notes. "What about reconciliation? Have you considered sitting down with Ms. Whitmore to—" "No." The word landed like a hammer. Veronica leaned forward. "This isn't about one woman's prejudice. It's about the system that emboldens it. So no, I won't be having tea with the woman who endangered my child. But I will be using every legal tool available to ensure she never does it again." The studio was so quiet, you could hear a pin drop. The anchor swallowed. "We'll be right back after these messages." The camera light winked out. Veronica removed her earpiece and stood. "We're done here." The florist's shop smelled overwhelmingly of roses. Karen lingered near the entrance, her sunglasses and baseball cap doing little to hide the nervous energy radiating off her. "Can I help you?" the clerk asked. Karen approached the counter, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to know who ordered flowers to my house yesterday." The clerk, a young woman with purple streaks in her hair, frowned. "We can't give out that information." Karen pulled out the card. "This was sent to harass me. I need to know who—" "Oh!" The clerk's face lit with recognition. "The Big Lily arrangement? That came from Carter and Associates." The name hit Karen like a punch. The clerk kept talking, oblivious. "They're one of our corporate accounts. Ms. Carter always sends flowers after big cases." Karen was already out the door. Jaden's phone buzzed during dinner. His mom paused mid-bite. "Who's texting this late?" He checked the screen. "Unknown number." Veronica's fork clinked against her plate. "Don't answer it." But the message preview was already visible. "I know what your mother did. The flowers were cruel." Jaden's blood ran cold. He showed his mom. Veronica's expression didn't change. She took the phone, typed a single response, and handed it back. "Restraining order violation number 1. Keep counting." The phone didn't buzz again. Across the table, Veronica resumed eating like nothing had happened. Jaden stared at his mac and cheese, suddenly not hungry. Somewhere in the city, Karen Whitmore poured her third glass of wine. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence. The rain started just as Karen reached her car, fat drops splattering against the windshield as she fumbled with the keys. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Carter and Associates. Of course. That woman hadn't just humiliated her in front of the entire internet. She'd sent those flowers as some kind of twisted victory lap. The engine roared to life, the radio blaring some inane pop song before Karen slapped it off. Silence. She needed silence. Her phone buzzed in the cup holder. Another unknown number. She didn't even look this time. The drive home was a blur of stoplights and honking horns, her mind racing faster than the wipers could clear the glass. Mark would be home by now. Would he have seen the interview? That awful woman on national television, spinning the story like Karen was some kind of monster? Her stomach twisted. The garage door groaned open, revealing Mark's Audi already parked inside. Karen took a deep breath, smoothing her hair in the rearview mirror. She could do this. She could walk in there and explain. The kitchen light was on. She froze in the doorway. Mark sat at the island, his suit jacket discarded over a chair, a glass of something amber in front of him. The television was muted, but Karen didn't need sound to recognize the footage playing. Her own face, pixelated and ashamed, splashed across the screen yet again. He didn't look up when she entered. "Mark, don't." His voice was quiet, which was worse than if he'd yelled. "Just don't." The air between them thickened. Karen's heels clicked against the tile as she moved to pour herself a drink. Anything to steady her nerves. The bottle trembled in her grip. "They're making me out to be some kind of racist," she whispered. Mark finally turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. "Aren't you?" The question hung in the air like a guillotine. Karen's glass hit the counter with a sharp clink. "I was concerned, that's all. Anyone wouldn't have, Karen." Mark stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "That's the point." She watched, numb, as he grabbed his jacket and headed for the stairs. "Where? Are you going?" "Hotel." He didn't turn around. "I need space." The word echoed in the sudden silence. Space. As if this were some minor marital spat, not the crumbling of her entire life. The garage door opened and closed. Karen was alone. Jaden's sneakers squeaked against the gym floor as Coach blew the whistle, signaling the end of practice. The team huddled up, sweat dripping down their faces as they chanted the school motto. "Game tomorrow, boys," Coach said, clapping his hands. "Be here by 6. And Carter?" Jaden tensed. "Principal wants to see you." Malik nudged him as they headed to the locker room. "Bet it's about that diversity thing." Jaden's stomach nodded. He'd been avoiding the decision, hoping if he ignored it long enough, it would go away. But the game was tomorrow. The whole school would be there, the news cameras. The thought made his skin crawl. Principal Nguyen's office smelled like lemon cleaner and old books. The man himself sat behind his desk, his hands steepled in front of him. "Jaden," he said warmly, "have a seat." The chair creaked under his weight. "We've had some discussions with the school board," Principal Nguyen began. "Given the circumstances, we think it's important to show unity. Tomorrow's game is an opportunity to send a message." Jaden's fingers dug into his knees. "What kind of message?" "That Riverside stands against racism." The principal slid a piece of paper across the desk. "We'd like you to say a few words at halftime, nothing long, just, 'I don't want to.'" The words came out sharper than he'd intended. Principal Nguyen blinked. "Jaden, this is bigger than—" "It's my face," Jaden interrupted. "My life. And I didn't ask for any of this." A beat of silence. The principal leaned back in his chair. "No, you didn't." Jaden exhaled. "But sometimes," Nguyen continued quietly, "the world forces these moments on us, and we have to decide how we'll meet them." Outside, the bell rang, signaling the end of the school day. Jaden stared at the speech draft, the words blurring together. "I'll think about it," he muttered, standing abruptly. Principal Nguyen didn't try to stop him. Veronica's office was quiet, save for the steady click of her keyboard. The restraining order documents glowed on her screen, the legalese scrolling endlessly. A knock at the door. "Come in." Her assistant, Marcus, poked his head in. "You've got a visitor." Veronica didn't look up. "I don't have any appointments." "It's, Marcus hesitated. "Karen Whitmore's husband." Her fingers stilled. Mark Whitmore looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. His tie was loose, his dress shirt wrinkled, and his eyes. Veronica recognized that look. The hollowed-out exhaustion of someone drowning in consequences. "Miss Carter," he said quietly. "I'd like to talk." She gestured to the chair across from her desk. "About?" "My wife." He sat heavily, his hands clasped between his knees. "I know what she did was unforgivable. But this, the restraining order, the media circus, It's destroying her. Veronica leaned back, studying him. And I'm asking you to reconsider. The air between them crackled. Veronica steepled her fingers. Let me ask you something, Mark. If that had been your son on that bench, would you be sitting here right now? He flinched. That's what I thought. She stood, signaling the end of the conversation. Tell your wife to get a lawyer, because this is just the beginning. Mark's shoulders slumped. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The door clicked shut behind him. Veronica returned to her computer, her fingers flying across the keys. Some battles couldn't be won with words. The diner was nearly empty when Jayden slid into the booth across from his mom. She looked tired, her usually pristine bun coming loose at the sides, but she smiled when she saw him. Practice go okay? Jayden shrugged, picking at the menu. Coach says I'm starting tomorrow. That's great. Yeah. He hesitated. Principal, Uyan wants me to give some speech at halftime about everything. Veronica's smile faded. What did you tell him? That I'd think about it. The waitress came by to take their orders. Cheeseburger for him, salad for her. The silence stretched between them, comfortable but weighted. You don't have to, Veronica said finally. If you're not ready. Jayden traced the condensation on his water glass. It's not about being ready. It's just... He struggled to find the words. Why does it have to be me? Why do I have to be the one to teach people not to be racist? His voice cracked on the last word. Veronica reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. Because the world isn't fair, baby, and it's asking too much of you. But sometimes... She squeezed his fingers. Sometimes we do the hard thing so the next kid doesn't have to. The fries arrived, steaming and golden. Jayden didn't touch them. I'll do it, he said quietly. Veronica nodded, her eyes shining. Outside, the sun began to set. The hotel room was sterile and impersonal, the kind of place designed for business travelers passing through. Mark sat on the edge of the bed, his phone in his hand, the screen dark. He should call Karen, he didn't. Instead, he scrolled through the news articles, dozens of them, all variations of the same story. His wife's face, that poor kid just trying to sit on a bench. The lawyer mother who'd become an overnight symbol of resistance. His finger hovered over a link. White woman who called cops on black teen loses job, husband. Mark's stomach turned. He hadn't left her. Not officially. But the article wasn't wrong. He couldn't go back. Not after seeing who she really was. His phone buzzed. An email from HR. Regarding your leave of absence. Mark dropped the phone on the nightstand and reached for the minibar. Somewhere across town, Karen stared at the same article, her reflection hollow in the darkened screen. The flowers on the counter had begun to wilt. The gymnasium buzzed with energy long before the game even started. Jayden could hear the crowd filtering in through the locker room walls. Laughter, chatter, the occasional burst of applause as someone made their way to the bleachers. He sat on the bench in full uniform, his knees bouncing nervously as he tied and retied his shoes. Malik plopped down beside him, knocking their shoulders together. You good? Jayden shrugged. Just ready to play. Uh-huh. Malik gave him a look. And the speech? Jayden's stomach twisted. He'd practiced it a dozen times, in front of his bathroom mirror, but the words still felt foreign in his mouth, like they belonged to someone else, someone braver. Coach's voice cut through the locker room. Listen up! The team gathered around, their sneakers squeaking against the floor. We've got a big crowd tonight, Coach said, his eyes lingering on Jayden for a beat too long. Lots of eyes on us, but remember, this is just another game. Play your hearts out and the rest will take care of itself. The team cheered, clapping each other on the backs as they headed for the door. Jayden hung back, his throat tight. Coach stopped him with a hand on his shoulder. You sure about this? Jayden nodded, though he wasn't sure at all. The roar of the crowd hit him like a wave as he stepped onto the court. The bleachers were packed, more people than he'd ever seen at a high school game. And there, right at center court, was a small podium with a microphone. His stomach dropped. The game passed in a blur. Jayden played on autopilot, his body moving through the motions while his mind raced ahead to halftime. He missed easy shots, fumbled passes, and by the time the buzzer sounded for the break, Riverside was down by 8. The crowd hushed as Principal Nguyen approached the mic. "Before we continue," he said, his voice echoing through the gym, "we have a special message from one of our own, Jayden Carter." The applause was deafening. Jayden's legs carried him forward on sheer muscle memory, his hands trembling at his sides. The podium felt miles high. He adjusted the mic, his mouth dry. The speech was right there in his pocket. He could pull it out, read the words someone else had written for him. But as he looked out at the sea of faces, some eager, some bored, some already filming on their phones, something inside him snapped. He took a deep breath and spoke from the heart. Karen sat in the dark, the glow of the television casting eerie shadows across the living room. She'd told herself she wouldn't watch, but here she was, her fingers digging into the armrests as the camera zoomed in on Jayden Carter's face. He looked young under the bright lights, younger than she remembered. The microphone squealed as he adjusted it, the sound making her flinch. I had a whole speech prepared," he began, his voice cracking slightly, "about racism and unity and all that. But the truth is," he shook his head, "I'm just tired." The gym was silent. Karen's chest tightened. "I'm tired of having to prove I belong in places I have every right to be," Jayden continued. "Tired of people like Karen Whitmore looking at me and seeing a threat instead of a kid. Tired of knowing that if my mom wasn't who she is, that video might have had a very different ending." Someone in the crowd shouted, "We got you, Jayden." He smiled faintly. "I know, and I appreciate it. But here's the thing. This isn't just about me. It's about every black kid who's ever been followed in a store, every Latino kid asked for papers, every Muslim kid called a terrorist." His voice grew stronger. "We're not the problem. The problem is people who look at us and decide who we are before we even open our mouths." The applause started slowly, then built to a thunderous roar. Karen could see people standing, cheering, some with tears in their eyes. Jayden waited for the noise to die down before adding, "So yeah, I'm tired, but I'm not giving up. And neither should any of you." He stepped away from the mic to a standing ovation. Karen reached for the remote with shaking hands and turned off the TV. The silence that followed was suffocating. Veronica watched from the bleachers, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as Jayden walked off the court. His teammates swarmed him, clapping him on the back, ruffling his hair. He smiled, a real one this time, and something in her chest loosened. Her phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. "Check your email, big development." She opened her inbox to find a message from the district attorney's office. The subject line made her breath catch. Whitmore v. City, settlement offer. The terms were better than she'd hoped. Mandatory sensitivity training for all officers, a public apology from the police department, and, her lips curved, a 5-figure donation to the youth center Jayden volunteered at. She typed a quick reply, "We accept." The second half of the game was a different story. Jayden played like a man possessed, driving to the basket with a focus Veronica hadn't seen all season. When the final buzzer sounded, Riverside had won by 12. She met him at the edge of the court, pulling him into a hug. "I'm proud of you," she murmured into his sweat-damp hair. He hugged her back tightly. "Thanks, Mom." Over his shoulder, Veronica noticed a familiar figure lingering near the exit. Mark Whitmore, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his expression unreadable. Their eyes met for a brief, charged moment before he turned and slipped out the door. Veronica held her son a little tighter. Some battles were worth fighting. The law office was quiet at midnight. Karen sat in the guest chair, her hands folded neatly in her lap as the attorney across from her, a balding man with tired eyes, sighed and rubbed his temples. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said slowly, "I'll be honest. Your case isn't strong. She'd expected as much. Still, hearing it aloud made her stomach churn. The video is damning, he continued, and given Ms. Carter's reputation, he trailed off meaningfully. Karen swallowed. What are my options? Option 1, we fight, drag this out, hope public opinion shifts. It'll be expensive and frankly, you'll probably lose. And option 2, we settle. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. The terms are generous, considering. Karen scanned the document, her vision blurring. The list of demands was long. Community service, diversity training, a public statement taking full responsibility. At the bottom, the amount she'd have to pay Jayden made her breath catch. She set the paper down carefully. I need to think about, and the attorney nodded. I'll give you until Monday. The walk to her car felt endless. The parking garage was nearly empty at this hour, her footsteps echoing off the concrete walls. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Mark. We need to talk. 3 words that always meant the same thing. Karen turned the key in the ignition and sat, there for a long moment, the engine idling before pulling out her phone. She typed a single word and hit send before she could change her mind. Okay. The youth center was bustling when Jayden arrived Saturday morning, the sound of bouncing basketballs and children's laughter filling the air. He'd been volunteering here since freshman year, but today felt different. Reynolds, the director, greeted him with a wide smile. Look who's famous. Jayden rolled his eyes, but he was grinning. Don't start. I'm serious. She handed him a clipboard. We've had triple the usual signups this week. Everyone wants to meet the kid who stood up to Karen. Jayden scanned the list. Dozens of new names, most of them young black boys. His throat tightened. Hey, Ms. Reynolds said gently. You okay? He nodded, blinking hard. Yeah, it's just a lot. She squeezed his shoulder. You don't have to be anyone's hero, Jayden. Just be yourself. The first group of kids came barreling in then, their sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. One of them, a tiny boy with braids and missing front teeth, stopped short when he saw Jayden. Whoa, the kid breathed. You're him. Jayden crouched down to his level. And who are you? Tyler. The boy puffed out his chest. I want to be like you when I grow up. Something warm spread through Jayden's chest. He held out a basketball. Well, Tyler, let's start with your jump shot. The morning passed in a blur of drills and laughter. For the first time in weeks, Jayden forgot about the videos, the speeches, the weight of expectation. He was just a kid playing basketball, and it was enough. The coffee shop was nearly empty when Mark arrived, the Sunday morning crowd still hours away. He spotted Karen immediately. She sat by the window, her hands wrapped around a mug, staring blankly at the street outside. She looked older. He slid into the chair across from her. Thanks for coming. Karen didn't meet his eyes. You said we needed to talk. A beat of silence. The barista called out an order, the sound jarring in the quiet space between them. Mark took a deep breath. I filed for divorce. Karen's hands didn't so much as tremble. She'd known, of course. Some part of her had known the moment he walked out that door. I understand, she said quietly. Mark studied her, really studied her, for the first time in years. The woman he'd married would have cried, would have begged. This version of her just sat there hollowed out and resigned. It didn't have to be this way, he said finally. Karen lifted her cup, her eyes meeting his over the rim. Yes, she said. It did. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall. The rain had settled into a steady drizzle by the time Karen left the coffee shop. She walked without an umbrella, the drops soaking through her jacket, chilling her skin. Mark's words echoed in her head with every step. I filed for divorce. She should have felt something, anger, sadness, relief. Instead, there was just numbness. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Another unknown number. She pulled it out, ready to ignore it, when the preview caught her eye. Ms. Whitmore, this is Rebecca Cho from the Daily Sentinel. Would you be willing to comment on Karen deleted it without finishing. The apartment was dark when she finally made it home. She'd moved out of the house last week, unable to bear the emptiness of it. This new place was smaller, furnished with things that didn't feel like hers. A temporary space for a life in limbo. She dropped her keys on the counter and froze. A single envelope sat in the center of the kitchen table. Her name was written across the front in neat, familiar handwriting. Marks. Her hands shook as she tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the divorce papers already signed, and a smaller slip tucked beneath it. A check. The amount made her breath catch. For the apartment, read the note at the bottom. Take care of yourself. Karen sank into a chair, the paper crumpling, in her grip. Outside, the rain tapped against the window like fingers. She didn't cry. The gymnasium was packed for Jaden's final home game of the season. Veronica sat in the front row, her hands clasped in her lap, watching as her son led the team onto the court. He moved differently now, more sure of himself, his shoulders no longer hunched under invisible weight. The crowd erupted as he scored the first basket, the sound deafening. Veronica allowed herself a small smile. "Miss Carter?" She turned to find a young woman standing hesitantly beside her. Early 20s, dark hair pulled into a ponytail, a press badge dangling around her neck. "Yes?" "I'm Priya Sharma with the Tribune," the woman said, lowering her voice. "I was wondering if I could get a quick comment about the settlement." Veronica's smile faded. No comment. Priya hesitated. "It's just, the terms are unusually favorable. People are calling it a landmark case. I thought you might want to—" "What I want," Veronica said evenly, "is to watch my son play basketball." The reporter opened her mouth, then seemed to think better of it. "Of course, sorry to disturb you." She melted back into the crowd as the buzzer sounded for halftime. Riverside was up by 15. Jaden jogged over, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Who was that?" "Nobody important," Veronica said, handing him a water bottle. "You're playing well." He grinned, taking a long swig. "Coach says scouts are here tonight." She arched a brow. "Nervous?" "Nah." He shrugged, his eyes scanning the stands. "Just gonna play my game." The second half whistle blew. Jaden squeezed her shoulder before running back onto the court. Veronica watched him go, something warm and fierce swelling in her chest. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Whitmore signed the settlement. She allowed herself one small, satisfied nod before turning her attention back to the game. The community center was brighter than Karen remembered. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead as she stood in line, clutching the paperwork they'd sent her. Name, Karen Whitmore. The woman at the desk, late 50s, salt and pepper hair, kind eyes, scanned the list. Ah, yes, diversity and sensitivity. Training, Section B, room 203 down the hall. Karen's cheeks burned as she took the sticker badge. The other attendees milled about, some chatting quietly, others staring at their phones. None of them looked like her. Room 203 was already half full. When she entered, she took a seat near the back, avoiding eye contact. "All right, folks, let's get started." The facilitator, a young black man with a bright smile, clapped his hands. "I'm Devin, and for the next 8 weeks we'll be unpacking some heavy stuff, together. First rule, this is a safe space. Second rule, listen more than you speak." His gaze swept the room, lingering on Karen for a fraction of a second too long. "Who's ready to do some work?" A murmur of assent. Karen folded her hands in her lap, her nails digging into her palms. The first slide appeared on the projector. Understanding. Implicit bias. Devin smiled. "Let's begin." The scholarship letter arrived on a Tuesday. Jaden stared at it, the university crest gleaming up at him from the heavy paper. "Mom." Veronica appeared in the doorway, her hair still damp from her shower. "What is it?" He wordlessly handed her the letter. Her eyes scanned the page, then widened. "Full ride?" "Full ride," he confirmed, grinning. She pulled him into a hug so tight he could barely breathe. I'm so proud of you. Jayden buried his face in her shoulder, inhaling the familiar scent of her shampoo. For a moment, he was 12 again, small and safe in his mother's arms. She pulled back, cupping his face in her hands. Your father would be... Her voice broke. Jayden swallowed hard. Yeah. They stood there for a long moment, the weight of his absence settling between them. Veronica cleared her throat, wiping hastily at her eyes. We should celebrate. Dinner at Mario's? Jayden nodded. Sounds perfect. As she turned to call for reservations, he looked down at the letter again, tracing the embossed letters with his thumb. The University of Michigan is pleased to offer you. His chest felt too full. The grocery store was crowded for a Thursday afternoon. Karen moved mechanically through the aisles, her basket half full. The training session had run late, and all she wanted was to go home, pour a glass of wine, and... Excuse me. A woman reached past her for a box of cereal, her sleeve brushing Karen's arm. Karen froze. It was her, Veronica Carter. For a heartbeat, they both stood there, suspended in the surrealness of the moment. The cereal aisle. Of all places. Veronica recovered first. She took the box and stepped back, her expression unreadable. Karen's mouth went dry. A child's voice cut her off. Mom, can we get the chocolate ones too? Jayden appeared at the end of the aisle, his long limbs all angles and elbows. He stopped short when he saw Karen, his eyes flicking between her and his mother. The air grew thick. Veronica placed a hand on her son's shoulder. We'll discuss it at home. She didn't look at Karen again as they walked away. Karen stood there, her basket suddenly heavy, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. At the register, she abandoned her groceries and walked out empty-handed. The sun was too bright, the air too warm. She got in her car and drove, and drove, and drove. The highway stretched endlessly before Karen, the yellow lines blurring together as she drove with no particular destination in mind. The radio played static-filled songs from decades past, the occasional clear lyric cutting through the white noise, words about love and loss that felt hollow now. She'd left her phone on the passenger seat, watching as notification after notification lit up the screen before finally going dark. Somewhere near the state line, she pulled into a rest stop. The parking lot was nearly empty at this hour, just a lone trucker fueling up his rig and a family loading back into their minivan after what looked like a bathroom break. Karen sat with her hands still gripping the wheel, the engine running, watching as the family drove away with a squeal of tires. The trucker caught her eye as he walked toward the convenience store, giving her a curious look before shrugging and continuing inside. Karen exhaled slowly, finally turning off the ignition. The sudden silence was deafening. Inside the rest stop, the fluorescent lights buzzed ominously. Karen moved mechanically to the coffee station, pouring herself a cup of bitter, burnt-smelling coffee. At the register, a teenage cashier with chipped nail polish rang her up without making eye contact. $2.75. Karen fumbled with her wallet, her fingers clumsy. As she handed over the bills, she noticed the small television mounted in the corner behind the counter. The sound was off, but the closed captioning scrolled along the bottom. And there, frozen on the screen, was a familiar face, Veronica Carter, speaking at some podium, her expression stern yet composed. Karen's breath hitched. The cashier followed her gaze. Oh yeah, that lady's everywhere now, the girl said, handing Karen her change. Some big civil rights thing. My mom says she's a hero. Karen's fingers closed around the coin so tightly, the edges dug into her palm. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. The cashier's bored expression shifted to something more curious than slightly concerned. Ma'am, you okay? The coffee burned Karen's tongue when she took too quick a sip. Fine, she managed. Thank you. Back in her car, Karen sat staring at the coffee cup steaming in her cup holder. The image of Veronica on that screen lingered behind her eyelids every time she blinked. A hero. Of course, that's how people saw her. And what did that make Karen? The answer came too easily. The villain. The sun was beginning to set when Karen finally pulled back onto the highway. this time heading in the direction she'd come from. There was no running from this. No amount of driving could take her far, enough away from what she'd done, who she'd become. Her apartment was dark when she returned. Karen didn't bother turning on the lights as she moved to the window, staring out at the city lights twinkling below. Somewhere out there, Veronica Carter was probably giving interviews or having dinner with her son, living her life, moving forward. While Karen stood still, the coffee had gone cold. She poured it down the sink, watching the dark liquid swirl down the drain. The basketball court at the youth center was alive with noise, sneakers squeaking, balls bouncing, kids shouting and laughing. Jaden moved among them with practiced ease, correcting a shot form here, demonstrating a dribble technique there. The younger kids hung on his every word, their eyes wide with admiration. "All right, let's run that drill again," Jaden called, clapping his hands. "Remember, eyes up, knees bent." As the kids scrambled into position, Ms. Reynolds appeared at his elbow. "You've got a visitor," she murmured, nodding toward the doorway. Jaden turned to see his mother leaning against the door frame, still in her work clothes, a small smile playing at her lips. He waved, holding up one finger to indicate he'd be just a minute, then turned back to the kids. "5 more minutes, then we wrap up," he announced. "Who can make the most free throws?" The kids cheered, immediately lining up to take their shots. Jaden jogged over to his mom, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his arm. "Hey, what's up? I thought you had that meeting downtown." Veronica reached up to brush a stray curl off his forehead. "Finished early. Thought I'd come see my favorite coach in action." Jaden rolled his eyes but couldn't hide his grin. "They're just kids. I'm hardly a coach." "You're more than that to them," Veronica said softly, her eyes scanning the room. Several of the younger boys kept glancing over at Jaden, their expressions full of open admiration. "They look up to you?" Jaden shifted uncomfortably. "Yeah, well, it's just basketball." Veronica gave him a look that said she knew exactly what he was doing, deflecting, downplaying his importance. But she let it go, instead nodding toward the court. "Go finish up. I'll wait." As Jaden returned to the kids, one of the smallest boys, maybe 7 years old with braids and missing front teeth, tugged on his jersey. "Jaden, is that your mom?" the boy whispered loudly. Jaden nodded, crouching down to his level. "Yeah, that's her." The boy's eyes widened. "The one who beat the racist lady?" Jaden's breath caught. He'd known, of course, that the kids had heard about what happened. How could they not? But hearing it put so bluntly by someone so young sent a pang through his chest. "Yeah," he said finally. "That's her." The boy nodded solemnly. "My mama says your mom's the bravest person in the whole city." Jaden looked over at his mother, who was now chatting quietly with Ms. Reynolds, her profile illuminated by the late afternoon sun streaming through the high windows. Brave didn't even begin to cover it. "She is," he agreed, ruffling the boy's hair. "Now come on, let's see that jump shot." The classroom was too warm, the ancient radiator in the corner hissing and clanking despite Devon's repeated attempts to adjust it. Karen sat in her usual seat near the back, her notebook open to a fresh page, her pen uncapped but untouched. "Tonight we're going to talk about privilege," Devon announced, writing the word in bold letters on the whiteboard, specifically how to recognize it in ourselves and our daily lives. A murmur went through the room. Karen kept her eyes fixed on the blank page before her, the pen heavy in her hand. "I want you all to take a few minutes," Devon continued, "and write down 3 examples of how privilege has shown up in your own life. Then we'll share." Karen's stomach twisted. The other participants were already scribbling away, some with thoughtful expressions, others with frowns of concentration. Her own page remained stubbornly blank. The memory surfaced unbidden, that day at the park. Seeing Jaden on the bench, the immediate assumption that he didn't belong there, that he was dangerous, that she had the right to remove him. Her hand trembled as she finally put pen to paper. "Assuming public spaces are mine to control, believing my comfort matters more than others' rights. Calling the police on an innocent child. The words stared back at her, ugly and true. Around her, others were finishing up, some looking satisfied with their lists, others uncomfortable. Devin clapped, his hands. All right, who wants to share? No one volunteered. The silence stretched, thick with discomfort. Karen found her hand rising before she'd consciously decided to move. Devin's eyebrows shot up, but he recovered quickly. Karen, thank you for being brave. Brave. The word echoed in her head as she stood, her notebook shaking slightly in her hands. She cleared her throat. Assuming public spaces are mine to control, she read, her voice barely above a whisper. Believing my comfort matters more than others' rights. And she swallowed hard. Calling the police on an innocent child. The room was utterly silent. Karen could feel every eye on her, could practically hear the moment when recognition dawned for those who hadn't already made the connection between her and the viral video. Devin's expression was unreadable. Thank you for your honesty, Karen. That couldn't have been easy. Easy. Nothing had been easy since that day in the park. Karen sat down abruptly, her legs no longer willing to support her. The notebook slipped from her fingers, landing face up, on the floor for all to see. No one spoke. No one moved to pick it up. The radiator hissed like a disapproving spectator. The college brochures were spread across the kitchen table, a riot of colors and logos and smiling students. Jaden sat with his chin propped in his hand, idly flipping through one while his mother chopped vegetables for dinner. Still no closer to deciding? Veronica asked, nodding toward the mess of papers. Jaden sighed. Michigan's the obvious choice. Full ride, good program. But he hesitated. It's just far. Veronica's knife stilled for just a moment before resuming its steady rhythm. You're not worried about me, are you? Jaden picked at the corner of a brochure, avoiding her eyes. I just don't want you to be alone. Veronica finished for him, her voice gentle. She set down the knife and came to sit beside him. Jaden, look at me. He did, reluctantly. Her eyes were warm, proud. You're my greatest accomplishment, she said firmly. And watching you spread your wings, that's all I've ever wanted for you. She tapped the Michigan brochure. If this is where you want to go, then go. I'll be fine. Jaden exhaled slowly, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. You sure? Veronica smiled, though her eyes looked suspiciously bright. I survived law school and single motherhood. I think I can handle an empty nest. She stood, returning to her chopping. Besides, think of all the peace and quiet I'll have. Jaden snorted. You'll be bored within a week. Probably, she admitted. But that's what visiting weekends are for. The knife made a comforting rhythm against the cutting board as Jaden gathered up the brochures, stacking them neatly. Michigan on top. His fingers lingered on the glossy cover photo. A sprawling campus in autumn, leaves crunching underfoot, students laughing as they walked to class. A new chapter. His phone buzzed with a text from Malik. Dude, you decide yet? Jaden typed back. Think so. Go blue? The response was immediate. Hell yeah, Jaden smiled down at his phone, then up at his mother's back as she cooked. She was right. It was time. The apartment was too quiet. Karen stood at the window watching as the city lights flickered to life against the darkening sky. The sensitivity training notebook lay open on the coffee table, her cramped handwriting visible even from across the room. Her phone buzzed, the first time all day. A text from her lawyer. Final divorce papers ready for signing. When can you come in? Karen didn't respond. Instead, she picked up the remote and turned on the television, flipping to the local news. There, front and center, was Veronica Carter again, speaking at some charity event. The chyron at the bottom read, Civil Rights Attorney announces new scholarship fund for minority youth. Karen's finger hovered over the power button, but she didn't press it. Instead, she turned up the volume, listening as Veronica spoke passionately about equal opportunity and breaking cycles of injustice. The Camera panned to show Jaden standing beside his mother, tall and proud, clapping as she finished her speech. He looked happy, thriving. Karen's chest ached. She reached for her phone, typing out a reply to her lawyer. Tomorrow at 10. Then, before she could change her mind, she opened a new browser window and typed, "Volunteer opportunities near me." The search returned dozens of results: soup kitchens, literacy programs, community centers. Karen scrolled slowly, her finger trembling slightly as she clicked on one at random. Riverside Youth Center, basketball program volunteers needed. The photo showed a gleaming gymnasium, a group of kids gathered around a tall young man demonstrating a layup. Even from the back, Karen recognized Jaden immediately. Her finger hovered over the Contact Us button. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, the sound rising and falling like a living thing. Karen exhaled slowly and closed the browser. Not yet, maybe not ever. But for the first time since that day in the park, the thought didn't fill her with immediate denial. Just a quiet, uncertain possibility. The news segment ended, transitioning to weather. Karen turned off the TV, the sudden silence ringing in her ears. Tomorrow would come whether she was ready or not. The courtroom was nearly empty when Karen arrived, early for once. She sat stiffly in the hard wooden chair, her hands folded tightly in her lap, staring at the seal of the state hanging behind the judge's bench. The divorce papers weighed heavy in her bag. Her lawyer, a weary-looking man with coffee stains on, his tie slid into the seat beside her. All set? Karen nodded. No point in delaying the inevitable. Across the aisle, Mark sat with his own attorney, his posture rigid, eyes fixed straight ahead. He hadn't looked at her once since she'd entered. The distance between them might as well have been an ocean. When the judge called their case, Karen stood on trembling legs, listening as the legal jargon washed over her. Irreconcilable differences, equitable distribution, dissolution of marriage. The gavel fell with a finality that echoed in her bones. It was done. Outside the courthouse, the autumn air was crisp. Karen hesitated on the steps, watching as Mark walked away without a backward glance. 23 years of marriage ended with less ceremony than a traffic ticket. Her phone buzzed. A text from the community center. Reminder, your volunteer orientation starts in 1 hour. Karen exhaled slowly, her breath visible in the cool air. She could still cancel. No one would blame her. Instead, she squared her shoulders and hailed a cab. The youth center gymnasium was louder than Karen had anticipated. Children's voices bounced off the high ceilings as they ran drills under the watchful eyes of teenage volunteers. She stood just inside the doorway, gripping her orientation packet like a lifeline. First time? Karen turned to find an older black woman smiling at her, Ms. Reynolds, according to her name tag. Yes, Karen admitted. I'm not sure You'll be fine. Ms. Reynolds interrupted kindly but firmly. We start everyone with paperwork and observation. No pressure. She led Karen to a small table near the bleachers, where a stack of forms awaited. As Karen sat, her eyes were drawn to the court where a familiar figure moved among the children. Jaden Carter crouched to tie a little boy's shoe, his laughter ringing out as the child nearly toppled over onto him. He looked younger like this, not the viral sensation or the reluctant activist, just a teenager helping kids with their jump shots. Karen quickly looked down at her forms, her cheeks burning. Jaden's our star volunteer, Ms. Reynolds said, following her gaze. The kids adore him. Karen's pen hovered over the emergency contact line. He seems good with them. The best. Ms. Reynolds studied Karen for a moment before adding, We don't turn away anyone who wants to help, Ms. Whitmore. But I need to know, are you here to make yourself feel better, or to actually make a difference? The question hung between them, heavy and unflinching. Karen met her gaze. The second one. Ms. Reynolds nodded slowly. Then welcome aboard. The sound of bouncing basketballs and children's laughter filled the silence as Karen began to fill out the forms. her handwriting steadier than she felt. The campus was even more beautiful in person than in the brochures. Jaden stood on the quad at the University of Michigan, his suitcase at his feet, taking in the historic buildings and the buzz of student activity all around him. His mother sniffled beside him. "Mom," he groaned, though he was grinning. "You promised no tears." Veronica dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "I lied. Mothers do that." They both laughed, the sound mingling with the excited chatter of other arriving freshmen and their families. Jaden pulled her into a hug, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume. "You're going to be amazing," Veronica murmured into his shoulder. Jaden swallowed hard. "Thanks to you." When they pulled apart, Veronica cupped his face in her hands, her dark eyes shining. "No, thanks to you." A group of students wearing orientation leader t-shirts approached, offering to show Jaden to his dorm. He shouldered his bag, giving his mother one last smile over his shoulder as he was swept up in the tide of his new life. Veronica stood watching until he disappeared around a corner, then exhaled shakily. Her phone buzzed, a text from Marcus about an upcoming case. She typed a quick reply, then paused, looking up at the campus one more time. Her baby was gone, and it was exactly as it should be. The email notification popped up on Veronica's screen as she was preparing for bed. The subject line made her pause. Volunteer application, Riverside Youth Center. She opened it, scanning the contents quickly. Karen Whitmore's name jumped out at her, along with a request for background check authorization. Veronica sat heavily, on the edge of her bed, reading the message twice to be sure she hadn't misunderstood. Her first instinct was to call Ms. Reynolds, to demand to know what Karen could possibly be thinking. But as she stared at the screen, her finger hovering over the call button, she hesitated. The Karen in the email signature wasn't the same woman from the park. That Karen would never have volunteered at a place like the youth center, never subjected herself to scrutiny or possible rejection. Veronica exhaled slowly, then clicked approve. People could change. She knew that better than most. The first snow of the season was falling as Karen left the youth center, her shift over. The kids had worn her out in the best possible way, their energy boundless, their laughter infectious. She'd spent most of the afternoon rebounding basketballs and tying shoelaces, tasks so simple yet so meaningful. As she buttoned her coat, a familiar voice called out behind her, "Ms. Whitmore." Karen turned to find Jaden Carter standing there, a basketball under one arm, snowflakes catching in his dark curls. "Jaden," she said, her voice coming out hoarse. "I didn't know you'd be here today." He shrugged. "Last visit before I head back to school. Wanted to see the kids." An awkward silence fell between them. The snow continued to drift down, coating the sidewalk in a thin layer of white. Finally, Jaden spoke. "Ms. Reynolds says you've been coming every week." Karen nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "I wanted to help." Another pause. Then, to her shock, Jaden held out the basketball. "Want to shoot some hoops before you go?" Karen blinked at him, then at the ball. "I'm terrible at basketball." Jaden grinned, that same easy smile she'd seen him give the children. "Good thing I'm a great teacher." Something tight in Karen's chest loosened. She accepted the ball, its pebbled surface unfamiliar beneath her fingers. Together they walked back into the gym, the sounds of their laughter mixing with the squeak of sneakers on polished wood. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering the world in a fresh, clean blanket. Epilogue. The photograph went viral, of course. There was Jaden Carter, star college athlete and activist, standing beside Karen Whitmore, the woman who'd once called the police, on him, both of them smiling as they posed with a group of beaming children at the Riverside Youth Center's annual fundraiser. The caption read, "Redemption looks good on everyone." When reporters asked Jaden about it at his next press conference, he just smiled and said, "People can change. We should let them." And when a certain civil rights attorney was asked for comment, she simply nodded in agreement.